It's my second day on the job, and I'm sitting on the wooden floor of a small house with a local family of Burmese farmers. They're sharing with me eggs and rice and telling me about the latest yields of their eggplant crop. And I'm thrilled. I'm thinking, this is going to be one of so many adventures that I have during my time here in Southeast Asia, working with this nonprofit, meeting farmers, putting my MBA to great use, and feeling inspired. And like so many Westerners who go abroad to help, I'm also a little excited about getting loads of well-liked Facebook photos. Now, this was several years ago, and only much later, looking back on that experience, did I start to think about the impact I truly had. I thought I was there to help, but I was also there for my own experience. You see, when we pursue inspiration, we're also consuming for our own benefit. I started to think, what if that nonprofit hadn't paid me those few $1,000s and instead had given loans to the farmers they were already working with? They could have helped 24 families receive loans to buy farming equipment. Or what if I had stayed at my high-paying desk job in America, earned additional income to give back, and sent that money to that nonprofit? Or even sent that money directly to those farmer families I had met? What kind of impact would that have had? I want you to consider that doing what feels good isn't always what is good. So much of what we do in philanthropy is about pursuing our own experiences. Let's call this the ego economy. The ego economy is what we spend as individuals on buying inspiration and experiences. It's the money we give to nonprofits with the expectation that they'll inspire us, and in fact, the ones that do the best job at giving us those personal benefits are the ones that win. They're the ones that we give the most money to. The ego economy is the money we spend on trying to feel connected to a community, on not feeling helpless in the face of need, on removing guilt or buying hope. I've spent a lot of my career thinking about why philanthropy is so driven by personal benefits. So my own story doesn't start in Burma. It starts many years back. My family is, my mother and father are two immigrants that came to the United States. My father is from Iran and is a serial entrepreneur, and my mother is a Hungarian who has spent much of her life giving back to others. So it's only natural that I've been interested in global development with a bit of an eye to entrepreneurship. And before moving to Burma, I advised many of the largest foundations in the world. I saw there too, ego was driving many of their decisions. Think about so many well-named foundations we've heard of, and consider why they're all named after the founder or the donor. Or think about how when we go to a fundraiser or receive an annual report, we expect to see the names of major donors recognized and called out. That's all part of the ego economy. And several years ago, I thought, here's the problem. I can change this. What's missing is data and transparency. The reason we put our personal benefits in front of our giving is because it's so hard to find impact. So I started a company a couple years ago with the goal of bringing this data to light, making it easy for even the busiest donor to give based on impact and data using expert-vetted recommendations. And I found that it didn't really work. Even when presented with data, we still seem to seek those personal connections and personal benefits. Many donors told me, this data is interesting, but at the end of the day, I saw them giving to where they had a connection. And I realized as I thought about that, this is a fundamental part of human nature. It's within our nature to seek stories and inspiration, and it's no wonder that's a part of why we give. But let's look at how putting our ego into our giving, both when we give time and money, can be detrimental and actually lead to unintended consequences. First, starting with giving our time. This will probably sound familiar, but I'm going to use an example that's common in the United States, volunteering at a soup kitchen. Now, there's two issues with giving our time. The first is that when we volunteer, in many cases, that's actually a net negative for the nonprofit. In the soup kitchen example, the nonprofit has to hire a volunteer coordinator. They have to parade their beneficiaries in front of you or find a task for you that's going to make you feel good and inspired and want to come back. And they have to fill in last minute if you don't show up. In fact, nonprofits report that about 20% of their budgets are actually spent on engaging and motivating donors. In business terms, we'd call this a loss-leading activity. It's designed to get us to feel connected to the nonprofit, even if it's not always a positive economic benefit for them, because they know if we build that personal connection, we'll give more. Now, here's the other problem with that. Because we're volunteering, we seek organizations that will give us a great experience as volunteers, rather than those that have the highest impact. So we're actually biasing ourselves towards organizations based on our own experience rather than impact many times when we give our time and volunteer. Now, let's look at giving our money. This example will also probably sound familiar. Say a nonprofit CEO comes to you and says, "Hey, I have this amazing solution to end hunger in East Africa. We're going to send powdered milk directly to children in need in East Africa. You can participate. Our organization's extremely transparent and lean. All the money goes directly to buying milk and sending it and distributing it to Africa." Now, this might sound exciting, but here are 3 big problems with this approach to giving. First, there's a lot of layers of waste. If you think about giving $100 to an organization like that, think for a moment about the actual economic value of the end result of milk that reaches the hands of poor people. We're paying for all these layers of staff who are buying milk, we're distributing it, we're shipping it. At the end of the day, in many cases, the economic value reaching the person on the ground is less than half of what we donated. All of those jobs, in many cases, could be considered part of the ego economy, people who are working for their own benefit and personal motivation to try to do good. Now, the second issue is, again, our pursuit of a personal connection and story. So many donors I speak to have that one organization where they've met the founder or been personally touched, and they know that organization is doing great work. That's great, but how much of that is you actually seeking a connection, a personal link to an organization or founder that you've met, rather than really being analytical about where you're giving your money? If we're really honest with ourselves, a lot of those connections weren't based on a highly analytical process. And the last issue is one of a patronizing approach to this type of giving. In this particular example, it turns out that about 90% of East Africans in this region are lactose intolerant. And you can imagine one of the worst things you can do to a child who's malnourished is give them a substance that causes further diarrhea. This actually happened. In the 1990s, we sent thousands of metric tons of powdered milk to East Africa. It's rarely talked about, but it's such a great example of how our patronizing view on giving based on what we think other people need leads us to make bad decisions. There's countless examples of this. Think about sending books in a language that children can't actually read, or sending malaria nets to regions that have actually low rates of malaria. We do this over and over when we put our ego into the equation. Now, if you're like me at this point, you're probably feeling pretty hopeless. So when we put our ego into giving our time or our money, the results can be sometimes negative and lead to unintended consequences, or to us not being as impactful as we'd like to be. I felt pretty hopeless about this too, but there is a ray of hope. When you think about a way in which to truly take your ego out of the equation and give based on impact, there's one thing that's been proven to do this effectively, and it's this: unconditional cash transfers. That means literally what it sounds like: sending money, no strings attached, to the poorest people around the world so they can do with it what they need to do to improve their lives. This has been done in developing countries for many years, but only recently, with new technologies like mobile money transfers, have nonprofits emerged that can allow us as donors to actually send our money directly to the hands of the poor abroad. Some nonprofits, like Give Directly, that do this, are able to do so at scale in a highly transparent way, and the results are astounding. Give Directly, for example, reports that when they send money to the poor in Kenya and Uganda, where they operate, people do really surprising things with those resources. They buy prosthetic legs so they can go to work for the first time. Or they'll buy a more permanent metal roof to their home so they're not spending money monthly on small repairs. Or they'll buy livestock that generates income, like chickens, that allows them to boost their income. In fact, in Give Directly's research, they found for every $100 that you donate, they're able to send $90 directly to the hands of the poor. And for every $100 a poor person receives, they're able to lift their income by $27 in just 1 year. That's really astonishing. When I tell this to people, they often ask me, how does it work? How are they figuring out who to give this money to? Don't people actually just use it to buy alcohol? I think a lot of these questions come down to a lack of trust. And I encourage you to look up the research because there's been dozens of studies that show when we give money directly to the hands of the poor, it's not used for booze or working less hours. It's used to improve their lives. I see this as a really exciting opportunity. Right now, we have a solution that works. In the world today, about 1 out of 10 people live in extreme poverty. Despite all the progress, all of the innovation, about 700 million people are living on less than $2 a day in their local currencies. That's less than half of a Starbucks. And we have a solution that works. Furthermore, as a global community of individual donors, we're giving enough cash every year that we could literally more than double the income of every single poor person in extreme poverty around the world right now if we just started giving cash directly. That's a pretty incredible opportunity, but it requires a drastic change in how we think about giving. So I challenge you and encourage you to think about giving directly, or when you give, use giving cash directly as a benchmark. That should be a minimum bar that any nonprofit you give to can prove that they meet. It's simple, but surprisingly hard to beat. Now, I'll leave you with this, which is, it's okay. It's okay to pursue your ego when you give. It's okay to volunteer or take that gap year or join a board. And it's also okay to stay home and just send a check and skip that fundraiser. We know when we feel inspired, we open up our textbooks and give more. And it's great to give. But I also encourage you to think about when you're consuming and putting your ego into the equation versus when you're giving. When you do give impactfully, because it's about time we change how we give. And together we can change the world.